Right, my name's Marjorie Norman. I'm 86 and I went out to Africa at the age of 22.
How did you sort of get into that line of work?
There was an advertisement for the overseas service. So I applied. There's a lot of red on the maps in those days, in 1949. How about Dar es Salaam? So I had to go and have a look, see where Dar es Salaam was. I do a 2-year tour here, then I go to another red bit, you know, and I'll get all round the world. But of course I fell for Africa, I thought. Africa, and then I learnt Swahili, and so I thought, well, it's a bit of a waste. But, so I stayed 16 years. I loved it. Apart from getting malaria, Bill Heartseer, and various other odd little complaints you get in the tropics. Before I left, we built a 1,000-bed hospital in Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is not a big place, you know, but it was a centre for getting them in. And we got the United Nations. I used to liaise with UNICEF. You had village midwives who delivered babies. I'm sorry to give you the gory details, but they used to cut the umbilical cord with some rusty old bit of stone, you know, and they used to get terrible infections. Well, you had to learn Swahili if you wanted to go back to Africa, so you had to route around to find lessons, and they were, all you could find were people like white fathers, you know, or white gowns, and they were German, because it used to be German East Africa before the war, 1418 war. Right. Nalipenda, Tanganyika, Sana.
That's great.
Swahili, Kuta, what is it? Tutanama. Tanganyika was a trust territory for United Nations. It wasn't a colony. It was decided before we went out that eventually they would be handed over. It was a paternal, maternal cover over all these tribes. You couldn't just say, right, you're independent now, you know, because you would get all the ones with power and the muscle boys taking over, and any grants that you gave them would be collared by those big boys and put into their accounts, as it has since. The army, after independence, and before we'd done a proper handover, but we got black ministers in by then, African ministers, and they refused to give the soldiers a pay rise, and they needed a pay rise, you know, and they still had white officers, but the minister decided whether they would get the pay rise or not, and they changed it. So the soldiers mutinied, and the barracks was just up the road from where I lived, and the first thing I knew was first thing in the morning I woke up and I could hear guns going off, rifle shots. And then down the road, lorries, army lorries, packed with European army officers, English army officers, who'd been training these troops all along. And the Africans with them in the back with rifles saying, we're sending them home in Swahili. But I thought, well, there must be something going on. And if there's firing and guns going off, there's going to be trouble. And therefore there's going to be trouble with the hospital, and they'll need help down at the hospital. So I got in my car and started to go to the hospital. And I was stopped by a drunken soldier who rested a rifle. Loaded it was, I know, because I could shoot. And said, where was I going? And I said, well, I'm going to work. I always go to work at this time. And he was quite nonplussed when I said this, because they weren't used to women speaking Swahili. And so he said, well, go round the other way. That was all he said. Anyway, I went round the other way. It got very nasty in the town. And my boss said, I think you should go home, Marge. And we've reported it and it's all done. So off I went home, and I was sitting at home, sort of just looking out of the window at the road and where people were going up and down. And my next door neighbour came over, also a Marjorie, and she said, "You've got to come, they won't speak any English." This was some soldiers had arrived, about 4 or 5, no, 1 to start with, that's right. 1 had arrived and wouldn't speak English. So I went over to her house, and he was drunk, and he had grenades and ammunition and guns, and I started talking to him, and then 4 more came in after that. He was the pathfinder, and they have stood in this small, rather small sitting room, and I said, "Well, what do you want anyway?" He said, "Well, oh no," he said, "where are all the other single women?" So I said, "I don't know, not all here." So I sat down, my knees were knocking. So he said, "Why do you want to know?" So he said, "You go and stand in the road outside." And I said, "Certainly not." And he didn't know what to do about that either. So there was a hush. And then I saw this other girl's houseboy at the back, you know, and I said, "What do you want to this soldier?" And he said, "Drink." So I said to this girl's houseboy, "Can you bring 5 glasses of water through for these?" So he did, and they were a bit nonplussed. I think they expected us to be frightened, you know. And if you're not frightened, then they don't quite know what to do. I was terrified, actually, but still. And then we started, and I recognised some of the cicatrixes, you know, they wore these, and different tribes had different cicatrixes, and I recognised his. And so I said, "Well, what is the news of Nuala these days?" Because that was the area he came. He looked at me and said, "Do you know Nuala?" And I said, "Yes, I know it very well. You know the Buona DC down there." "Oh, you know Buona DC?" And we got quite matey and chatty. And in the end, I thought, well, they've been here long enough. We chatted quite a lot. And I said, "Well, I think I'll be going now, you know, having got it sorted." It was all in Swahili, none of these girls. They didn't learn it, the stupid women. And I always say you should learn the language of the country that you're in if you're living and working.